Today, I'm going to take you through a true story that sounds like something out of a crime novel. It's about a man who allegedly tried to burn down his own house, and might have gotten away with it if it was not for the heart device ticking away in his chest. This case, State of Ohio versus Ross Compton, became known as the pacemaker arson case, and for good reason. A 67-year-old man was accused of arson, and the key witness against him turned out to be his own heartbeat. How on earth did this happen? Let's start at the beginning, the night of the fire, and watch how Mr. Compton's story went up in flames, thanks to some creative, investigative work. It was the early morning hours of September 19th, 2016, in a quiet Middletown, Ohio neighborhood. Ross Compton's single-story home suddenly erupted in flames. Compton would later tell police that he awoke to find his bedroom ablaze and reacted in a panic. According to his version of events, he grabbed a suitcase and started packing essential belongings, including clothing, his computer, and even a charger for his heart device, and then used his cane to smash out his bedroom window. He then said he tossed the luggage out the window, and then climbed out the window himself to save his own life. In his 911 call, an out-of-breath Compton can be heard urgently saying, "I grabbed a bunch of stuff and threw it out the window," and alerting dispatch that he had an artificial heart device and was struggling to get out. When firefighters and police arrived, they found Compton's house fully engulfed in flames. It was a devastating blaze that would ultimately cause nearly $400,000 in damage to the 2,000 square foot home and to his belongings inside. Mr. Compton himself was outside, breathless but alive, with some of his personal items, strangely safe and sound, sitting beside him. He had managed to save multiple packed bags, his computer, and the external power pack for his heart implant. All items, he said, that he threw out the window. However, one resident of the home didn't survive the fire: Compton's pet cat. At first glance, Compton looked like a very fortunate, yet unfortunate victim. An elderly man with major health problems who barely escaped a deadly fire. Initially, no one suspected the fire was anything but a horrible accident. Compton told investigators that he had no motive whatsoever to burn down his own house, calling the idea utterly insane. But as fire crews doused the flames and the smoke cleared, some details didn't sit right with authorities. Middletown's fire and police departments started to notice inconsistencies that made them question Mr. Compton's story. Fire investigators picking through the rubble found several red flags that this was not an ordinary house fire. Multiple points of origin were identified, meaning that the fire had been started in more than one place, this being a classic sign of arson. Even more suspicious, traces of gasoline were found where they shouldn't have been. Lab tests detected gasoline on Compton's shirt, pants, and shoes. To investigators, it looked like someone had splashed fuel around to help the fire spread, and that someone ended up with gas on them themselves. Moreover, the items Compton saved hinted at planning rather than panic. The suitcases and bags he quickly packed were filled with important possessions and ended up neatly outside. Well, almost everything else burned. It was as if he made sure that the things he cared about most, electronics, personal items, and his medical device's power unit, were safe from the inferno. For an elderly man with severe heart failure, Compton's reported flurry of activity, lugging heavy suitcases, smashing a window, and hauling everything to the car within minutes. Investigators quietly wondered whether a man in his condition could truly pull off these feats in the short timeline he described. Police also noted inconsistencies between the story he told firefighters and the version he later told to detectives. These contradictions, combined with the gasoline evidence and the multiple ignition points, started to turn Compton from victim to suspect. But suspicion alone isn't proof. Investigators needed something concrete, and they realized it might be hiding inside Compton's own body. Before we get to the high-tech evidence, it helps to understand who Compton was. He was 66 years old at the time of the fire, a man with no known history of violent crimes. but with serious health struggles. He suffered from congestive heart failure and had recently undergone major cardiac surgery. Implanted in his chest was a Medtronic cardiac pacemaker, along with components of an artificial heart pump that helped circulate his blood. He walked with a cane and relied on an external battery pack. Physically, he was extremely limited. His finances were strained too. He told the judge during his first court appearances, "Your Honor, that fire took everything." He had been living on Social Security disability since 2002 and claimed that he only had $6 to his name. Meanwhile, the home that burned down was insured for around $400,000, giving him a possible financial motive, even though he insisted he wasn't after insurance money. In fact, his insurer eventually sued to avoid paying his claim. A judge later ruled in the insurer's favor, stating that Compton had failed to cooperate and had breached his policy by refusing to provide documentation and skipping a required interview under oath. Compton had no spouse or children living with him. On the 911 call, when asked if everyone was out of the house, he simply replied with, "Yeah, everybody's out," referring mostly to himself. It was just him, and the cat that didn't make it. Middletown detectives, led by Lieutenant Jimmy Cunningham, realized that Compton's pacemaker might hold the key to verifying his story. Think about what Compton claimed. He woke up from his sleep, saw a raging fire, panicked, and in minutes exerted himself to an extreme degree, scrambling to collect his belongings, breaking a window, and hauling heavy items outside. If that were true, a man with his medical condition would have had a heart rate through the roof. It should have been pounding from fear, stress, and exertion. If he had actually been taking it easy, say, staging a fire, the pacemaker's data would show a calmer profile. Investigators obtained a search warrant, and technicians worked with a Medtronic representative to download the logs from Compton's pacemaker. The device recorded his heart rate, pacer activity, and rhythm trends before, during, and after the fire. The results of this search were devastating to Compton's story. A cardiologist analyzed the data and concluded that Compton's version of events was highly improbable. His heart activity suggested a man who was awake, calm, and not engaged in sudden, strenuous movement. In one case summary, the pacemaker was described as the smoking gun that led to Compton's indictment. By January 2017, a grand jury indicted Compton on aggravated arson and insurance fraud. Police arrested him, and thanks to the pacemaker's evidence, they believed they had their proof. Compton publicly maintained his innocence. He told reporters, "I had no motive whatsoever to burn down my own house," adding that losing the home only hurt him financially. But investigators countered that he was already bankrupt, and that insurance money may have been his only way out of the situation. Then things got even weirder. In early 2018, Compton failed to appear at a pretrial hearing. He essentially went missing for several months until police tracked him down and arrested him again. He claimed that he was confused about the court date. The judge didn't buy it and raised his bond. While investigators built their case, a major legal debate unfolded over the pacemaker's data. Compton's attorneys argued it violated his privacy and doctor-patient confidentiality. They claimed pulling medical data from inside his body was akin to forcing him to testify against himself. But judges ruled against him. The court found that police obtained the data with a valid search warrant, no different than collecting a blood sample or searching a phone. A judge bluntly stated that while pacemaker information is intimate, it's not off limits when law enforcement obtains a warrant. A Medtronic representative testified that retrieving the logs was quick, non-invasive, and essentially the same as what happens during a routine checkup. Privacy advocates were uneasy, warning that Americans shouldn't have to choose between health and privacy. Compton's case became a national headline, the first known U.S. criminal prosecution using pacemaker data as key evidence. Compton's trial never happened. He died in April 2020 at the age of 62, still legally presumed innocent. The dramatic jury trial, where a man's heartbeat would be used against him, never materialized. But the legacy of this case lives on. It opened the door for law enforcement to look at medical device data as evidence. Middletown investigators confirmed that they had used pacemaker data in 2 homicide cases to help estimate victims' time of death. And nationwide, fitness trackers, smart home devices, and other electronics have already played silent witness roles in criminal cases. It's equal parts fascinating and unsettling. On one hand, science helped expose an alleged crime. On the other, it raises eerie questions about privacy in a world where our bodies and our gadgets are constantly generating data. Compton's attorney warned, "Is this the level the government is going to? Seizing information from a beating heart?" The courts effectively answered, yes, with a warrant, they can. And that concludes the bizarre, groundbreaking tale of the pacemaker arson case. A case that got to the heart of the matter in more ways than just one. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you do not miss an upload. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you all in the next video.